In the beginning, God began to create the heavens and the earth. The earth was complete chaos, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and let it separate waters from waters." So God made the dome and separated, so that the waters above the dome and the waters below the dome. And it was so. God called the dome sky, and there was evening, and there was morning, the second day. God separated the light from the dark, day from night, the sky from the sea. On the first day and the second day, and again on the third and the fourth and the fifth day, God created boundaries. Boundaries are what allow light to be light and dark to be dark, the day to be day and the night to be night. Boundaries allow the sky to be the sky and the seas to be the sea. Boundaries allow you to be you and me to be me. Before God created boundaries, it was, what did it say? Complete chaos. So today we're talking about boundaries, sacred boundaries. And I know this is a little bit of a hot topic, especially on social media and in people who go to therapy. Boundaries are a very hot topic, and for good reason. And so today we're talking about a spiritual take on boundaries. How many of you are familiar with the Four Agreements? That book by Miguel Ruiz? Awesome. Be impeccable with your word, don't make assumptions, always do your best, right? These four agreements, Don Miguel is very clear in the opening of the book, are agreements that we make with ourselves. In a way, they're boundaries. Boundaries are not things that we do to other people. Boundaries are for us. Here's what I am willing and not willing to do. I had the opportunity to spend a weekend with Don Miguel and his two sons, Mike and Jose. And when we were talking about the four agreements, he made the joke that he probably should have included a fifth agreement or maybe a disclaimer at the end of the book. Because what he said he found was that the more popular it got, the more he would hear stories of people trying to hold others to these four agreements. You're not being impeccable with your word. You're making assumptions. Boundaries are not for others, they are for us. So I think the four agreements specifically don't make assumptions and don't hold people to agreements they never made, fall right in line with boundaries. So my dog Theo, when I first got him, I made the decision that I wasn't going to tell him no. Now, before you start judging me, let me tell the full story, okay? So here was my thought. When he first came home, he doesn't know right from wrong. He doesn't know what he's allowed to do and what he's not allowed to do. For example, the breeder let him run around outside and chew on socks. I would not let him chew on socks, but that's what she did. So I knew that I had to teach him the correct way to behave. So puppies, have a lot of toys. So we had all these toys scattered about the room. And also on the floor of the room were a pair of shoes. Now, how's he supposed to know? All of these soft cloth things I can chew on, but this other soft cloth thing I'm not allowed to chew on. So if he happened to pick up a shoe, instead of telling him no, what I would do is take one of his other toys and crinkle it and squeak it and make it all exciting. And sure enough, he would drop his shoe and he would come over and he'd start playing with that toy. And I'd praise him and we'd have so much fun, and he realized the toy's a lot more fun than that shoe. So my intention here was not to tell him no or punish him or scold him, for doing something he didn't know he wasn't allowed to do. We cannot punish people for behaving in ways that they don't know you don't want them to behave. We can't punish people for saying things to us that we don't want to hear when we never told them that we didn't want to hear that. Boundaries require us to have these conversations. So what I did with Theo is called redirection. When somebody's doing something that you wish they weren't doing, you just redirect them into something else, and eventually they forget all about it. This works really great with dogs and kids up to about the age of 5. After that, it's not going to work so well, right? Could you imagine you're at lunch with a friend and they start gossiping about one of your mutual friends and you don't really want to be part of that negativity, so you like pull a necklace out of your pocket and go, ooh, look, shiny. I don't think it'll work so well. So as we get older, over the age of about 5 or 6, and throughout our life, we do not benefit from redirecting, we benefit from clear boundaries. So that's when it changes from, ooh, look, shiny, to, I will take you to the park for 30 minutes after you clean up your toys. Or, if you want me to listen to what you have to say, I need you to lower your voice. Or I can take on this project once this other project is complete or reassigned to someone else. Boundaries. You all have heard about the golden rule, right? Treat others the way you would want to be treated, right? Okay, so I've got a better one for you. It's called the platinum rule, because platinum's better than gold. Here's the platinum rule. Treat others the way they want to be treated. Because not everyone wants to be treated the same. Last time I was here 2 weeks ago, we talked about the concept of oneness and how in truth and in spirit we all are one. But right now in this human experience, in expression, oneness does not mean sameness. Just because we are all one does not mean we are all the same. We all grow up with different types of parents, with different experiences, with different values. We all have different opinions and different needs and different preferences. Let me share one that I ran into a couple years ago. When I quit my corporate job to pursue ministerial school full-time, it obviously impacted our household income quite a bit. So one of the things that my husband and I talked about was a way that I could contribute was I would go to the grocery store and meal plan and cook dinners every night. Because when we were both working corporate jobs, we ate out a lot. So this was a new thing for me. I did not grow up cooking. My mom wasn't much of a cook. My husband can like open the pantry and grab 3 random things and make a meal out of it. I do not have that skill. So I put in a lot of effort and energy into cooking these meals. So here's what I learned. My husband was following the golden rule, treating others the way you want to be treated. And his preference when he cooks a meal is he wants feedback. He would like to know if it's spicy enough or too spicy. He'd like to know if he cooked the meat well. He would like to know if it needs more seasoning here, if it tastes too bland. He wants that feedback. I did not. You see, because how I grew up was if somebody cooks you a meal, the only appropriate thing to say is, thank you, it's delicious. Anybody else? Okay, thank you. Dane's not here today. I did ask him for permission to tell this story, and he said, I'm glad you're telling it on a day that I'm not there. So here's the mistake I made. I made an assumption. I made an assumption that my husband had the same preference that I did, to be thanked for a meal that you cook and not get feedback. And I held him to an agreement that he never made. So I set a boundary and we made an agreement, and it was this. I am happy to continue cooking dinners every night. If you would like to provide feedback on the meal, we need to sit down on Sunday afternoons and you're going to help me pick out all the recipes, and I will cook them exactly as the recipe says, and if you want to critique the recipe, we can do that. If you would prefer not to spend that time helping me meal plan, I'm still willing to continue to cook, but the only feedback I will accept is thank you, it's delicious. He helped me meal plan one time. Now, I've become such a great cook. So the platinum rule, treat others how they want to be treated. But here's the problem. People don't often tell us how they want to be treated until we've already made them mad, right? So boundaries are kind. Boundaries are kind because we're not leaving it up to a guessing game. We are clearly communicating to our friends, to our family, to our boss, to our children, to our parents, to our loved ones. This is what I need. Can you please do this for me? And if you can't, here's what I'm going to have to do. You see, boundaries allow us to express the light of God that we are, to do what we are being called to do. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Okay, the words of Jesus in Matthew chapter 5, verse 37. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. A little rough. All you need to say is yes or no. Has anyone ever said yes when you really wanted to say no? Yeah. Saying yes when you really want to say no, the problem with this is that it forces you to say no when you really want to say yes. Think about it this way. We only have 24 hours in a day, right? And between sleeping, eating, and grooming, we have, maybe 12, 14 hours that we can use and decide what we do with that time each day. And if we're constantly saying yes to things that aren't in alignment with us, aren't what we're being called to do, that we really wanted to say no to, but we did it because we were obligated and we're not even happy when we're doing it, and every time we have to do it, we're like, oh, why did I say yes to this? We're making ourselves a little miserable, let's be honest. And at the same time, if your day is filled up with all those things you said yes to that you didn't want to say yes to, when that amazing opportunity comes along, the one that makes your heart and your soul and your whole body say, yes, that is exactly what I need to do, you don't have the time, and so you have to say no. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Owning and committing to both our yes and our no helps us become more of a channel for that expression of God that we are. It allows us to unfold more of the unique person we came here to be, the work that is calling to us. Has anybody seen the movie Yes Man? Zooey Deschanel, Jim Carrey. Okay, so the premise of this movie is Jim Carrey's character is in a pretty rough place in his life, not very happy, things aren't going well. So he goes to this self-help seminar. And the whole thing is say yes to everything. That's what this self-help guru is preaching. Any time anybody asks you anything, say yes. So he does this because what have I got to lose? And some not so great things happen. He has to say yes to a hitchhiker. He has to say yes to the hitchhiker when he has to use his cell phone. So now he's stranded, out of gas, and his cell phone's dead. So some not great stuff happens. But then, he meets a girl, and he learns to play guitar, and he goes on all these exciting adventures, so that there's some good stuff too. Then there's this moment. He's with this girl, and she looks at him, and she says, I know we haven't known each other that long, but do you want to move in together? And he pauses for a second and then says, yes. And so the question that you're left wondering about as the viewer, and that probably he's wondering about, is did I really mean yes? Was the pause the no? And so it all unfolds and, works out great in the end because it's a movie. So it all unfolds the way that it does. But I found it so interesting How often we say yes when we don't really mean yes. We say yes, I think, because we're worried about disappointing people. But you know when you say yes to something you don't really want to do and you don't really put your whole heart into it, you don't really do a great job with it because you'd rather not be doing it, I think we kind of end up disappointing people anyways. My question is also, would you rather disappoint that person by saying no to something that's really not in alignment for you? Or would you rather disappoint yourself? So boundaries help us define what we want in our life and what we want out of our life. It's all about principle number 3 in unity. We co-create our experience through our thoughts. So in order to set good boundaries, we have to start with a lot of spiritual discernment. Brene Brown, I talked about her last time. She's a psychologist, researcher, podcaster, author, does a ton of work around boundaries and vulnerability and shame. She says that sometimes when we first start practicing boundaries, we become what she calls a boundary bully. And she named it this because she experienced it, and I've experienced it myself as well. When we first start setting boundaries, we almost go a little too far, right? Boundaries pretty much become, this is my way to stop doing anything I don't want to do. It's all about me. It makes us a little selfish sometimes. That's where we temper our desire to set boundaries with our spiritual discernment. So going into meditation, going into prayer, if you've got a situation that's frustrating you, that you feel like I maybe need to set a boundary here, taking that into meditation, tuning into the Christ within, that still small voice, and asking, what is mine to do here? What am I being called to in this situation? It could be that you're being called to just let it go, to find acceptance for the person. Or it could be that you're called to make a clear and loving boundary. Ask in that meditation also, how can I bring love into this situation? Because at the end of the day, boundaries are about love. Boundaries, in fact, are the closest distance at which you can love yourself and another fully. Boundaries are not about being selfish. They're not about getting out of everything you don't want to do. Boundaries are about being clear with yourself of what you are here to do. What is mine to do? And through love and compassion and kindness, having that hard conversation with another about what that boundary is and what you are and are not here to do. So boundaries require knowing what you want, knowing what you're called to do. They require you to seek guidance from Spirit regularly to make sure you're not building a fortress around yourself, but rather just protecting yourself in the way that you need to so that you can fully express who you came here to be. Boundaries require bravery to be able to have the tough conversations. Let me give you an example. Let's say you come to church with someone, you carpool, and you love coming with this friend and sitting together and going to church together. The only problem is you and your friend have slightly different definitions of what it means to be on time. Let's say you like to be here 10 to 15 minutes early, you like to have some time to socialize, you want to find your spot and claim it with your purse. But your friend, as long as we're pulling into the parking lot at 10:30, that's good enough. So it's not that you're doing anything wrong or they're doing anything wrong. It's that oneness doesn't mean sameness, and we all have different preferences. So there's a few things you could do here. Maybe you just say, oh, I'm just going to be more accepting and loving and put up with it, and you come to church late, and you do that over and over again until the anger and the frustration builds into resentment until one day you snap at them. Anyone ever accidentally choose that option? No? Just me? Okay. So that's option 1. Option 2 is you make up an excuse. Oh, I've got some errands to run before church, so I'm just going to meet you there. Oh, okay. And then the next week you have more errands, and then before long your friend's wondering, what are all these errands she's running on Sunday mornings? Or she starts to really get the accurate impression that you don't want to ride to church with her. And she thinks, I must have done something wrong. And so slowly over time, you guys kind of stop talking and drift apart. And before you know it, you've lost a friendship. Anyone ever accidentally choose that option? Just me on that one too? Okay. So here's option 3. Jeanette, I love riding to church with you. I do, and I love that we get to sit together and spend that time together. The only thing is, I really like to be there at 10:15, and I know you don't mind coming until 10:30, which is fine. So I wanted to ask you, could we make an arrangement where we're able to get here by 10:15? And if not, that's okay. I'll just drive myself, and I'll save you a seat. How about that? What would work for you? It's scary to have those conversations sometimes, right? But that's a boundary. Is that a more loving way to approach this situation than letting my anger and resentment build until I snap, or slowly distancing myself from somebody where they have to wonder what they did wrong? Boundaries are loving, and they require us to be brave to have those tough conversations. Now, the challenge about being a minister and only having 25 minutes is I don't have the time to say everything I want to say about this topic. So when I was thinking about what I really wanted to hit on, I figured that with this group, I'm not in a group that I have to worry too much about you guys being really selfish and needing to temper your boundaries. I have the feeling that what you need help with is saying no. Am I right? Yeah. Okay, so we're going to practice. I'm going to say something, and then I want you to repeat it, okay? That doesn't align with my intention. That doesn't align with my intention. I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to do that. I need time to think about it. I need time to think about it. No. No. No is a complete sentence. Yes. So when we're setting boundaries, when somebody asks you to do something and you don't want to disappoint them, but you know that this is not in alignment for you, you can use one of those options, or here's a great template. While my heart says yes, and I see how important this is, the reality of my time is it's going to have to be a no for me. You do not have to explain about this big new project you took over at work, or that you're having problems with this person, or that your car broke down. You don't have to explain it. No is a complete sentence. And you can say no lovingly so that you protect the expression of God that you came here to be. So that you do what you are being called to do, and that you don't have to say no to those spiritual God nudges that push and pull you in that direction. You don't have to say no to them because you said yes to too many other things. So to summarize, boundaries are for ourselves. It's not about forcing other people to do what we want them to do. It's about clearly communicating what I am willing and not willing to do. Boundaries are kind because they set clear expectations so you don't end up punishing someone for doing something you don't want them to do when you never told them you didn't want them to do that. It helps us not make assumptions that other people want to be treated the same way that we want to be treated, and not make assumptions that other people have the same values that we do. Boundaries allow us to love more fully, both ourselves and others, because they keep us from building up resentments against people for taxing our time in ways we don't want. And boundaries, first and foremost and most of all, require spiritual maturity. They require you to continually seek the guidance of God so that you know where you are being called, so you can say yes and no Let your yes be yes and your no be no, in the way that is going to help you unfold that beautiful expression of Christ that you are. Let's move now into our meditation. Taking a moment to get comfortable in your chair, breathing in and breathing out. Sweet Spirit, we settle into this space and this moment. And as we sit here, we notice the boundary of our skin, where we end and our chair begins, against our back and against our hips. We affirm that while we are one in truth, we are separate in expression. And each of us, a unique expression of the divine, called for some purpose. Whether that purpose is to bring joy and laughter into our everyday moments, to nurture and protect those who need it, to build the things that people need, to problem solve, to connect. We know that each of us was called for a unique purpose, perfectly meant for us. And so we take this time in meditation, tuning into our heart space to hear your whispers, to feel your nudges, to notice those things that light us up, that make our hearts sing, those things that are meant for us. And because we love and cherish the unique expression of the divine that we are, and because we see the Christ light in one another, we stand in our boundaries by your example. I allow you to be you so that I can be me. Let's take a moment in silence. In this moment, we are open and receptive to divine guidance. We affirm our power of discernment, that sacred and holy process of judgment by which we decide what to keep and what to release. We are centered. We are whole. We are love in expression. And so it is. Amen.